Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 16, verse 25. Dharanyuvacha Bhavan hi Veda tat sarvam Yanmam dharm anuprachasi Shatubhir avartaseyena Padarlaka suvan vana. Translation: the earthly deity in the form of a cow thus replied to the personality of religious principles in the form of a bull. O Dharma, whatever you have inquired from me shall be known to you. I shall try to reply to all those questions. Once you too were maintained by your four legs, and you increased happiness all over the universe by the mercy of the Lord. Purport: the principles of religion are laid down by the Lord himself, and the executor of such laws is Dharmaraj or Yamaraj. Such principles work fully in the age of Satya Yuga. In the Treta Yuga, they are reduced by a fraction of 1/4. In the Dwarpa Yuga, they are reduced by 1/2. And in the Kali Yuga, they are reduced to 1/4, gradually diminishing to the 0 point, and then devastation takes place. Happiness in the world depends proportionately on the maintenance of religious principles, individually or collectively. The best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. Thus, one can be happy during the span of life and ultimately return to Godhead. Translation: the earthly deity in the form of a cow thus replied to the personality of religious principles in the form of a bull. O Dharma, whatever you have inquired from me shall be known to you. I shall try to reply to all those questions. Once you too were maintained by your four legs, and you increased happiness all over the universe by the mercy of the Lord. So Dharma, the bull, asked some questions about the cause of the lamentation of the earth. And in doing so, Dharma raised up a lot of very pertinent facts about the conditions of Kali Yuga, which would be a cause of lamentation. And actually, they're all true. But of course, the whole section here is to teach us something. So therefore, the earth then replies to all these questions by giving a very comprehensive answer to the cause of lamentation, starting in the next verse, which lists a whole series of qualities that belong to the Supreme Lord when he is present. So Dharma was in the form of a bull. And as Prabhupada explains in the purport, in the first yuga, that is Satya Yuga, we have full Dharma. And then in Treta Yuga, 1/4 is reduced, so we have 3/4 Dharma. And in Dwarpa Yuga, we have half, 2/4 Dharma. And in Kali Yuga, we got 1/4 Dharma. So four legs are there, so we have four legs existing in Satya Yuga, 3 legs existing in Treta Yuga, 2 legs existing in Dwarpa Yuga, and 1 in Kali Yuga. Yeah. And also we have, correspondingly, the lengths of these spans of time. So there are multiples. Kali Yuga is 1, Dwarpa Yuga is 2, Treta Yuga is 3, and Satya Yuga is 4/4. So therefore Treta, we get the Treta means 3, and Dwa means 2, like this. So Kali is 1 and Satya is 4, all 4 intact. So in terms of length of time, Yeah? So in other words, Dwapara Yuga is twice as long as Kali Yuga, Treta Yuga is 3 times as long, and Satya Yuga is 4 times as long. In other words, everything decreases by 1/4 as we, in terms of whole span of the Yuga, lifespans, etc. All things decrease and decrease and decrease as we go on. So the important factor is Dharma. This keeps decreasing as we go on. And the present situation, why the earth is lamenting, of course, is that Dharma has only one leg left. And if Dharma is suffering, then the earth suffers. So Dharma, as Prabhupada explains, is also Dharmaraj or Yamaraj. In the aspect of Yamaraj, we have a little bit of a fear because Yamaraj is death. Nobody likes death. Nevertheless, he is the maintainer of Dharma also. And if one breaks the Dharma, then the Lord Yamaraj comes and punishes you. So that's, of course, we could say the material aspect of Dharma. If we break the rules, then we get punishment. And Yamaraj is in charge of punishing the living entities for their sinful activities. To maintain Dharma, we have Yamaraj or Dharmaraj. And Yudhisthira was a son of Yamaraj. So he was very befittingly made the king of the whole world to institute Dharma properly. And of course, both Yamaraj and Yudhisthira are great devotees of the Supreme Lord. So Dharma and Bhakti cannot be really separated. If we try to separate them, we have an appearance of Dharma, but it's not real Dharma. It is said that when Duryodhana took over the kingdom for some time and was ruling, it apparently looked very good because he was following all the conduct that was befitting of a king. And it looks like he was benevolent to the citizens and doing things properly. So one may say, why he cannot be the king? Why does Yudhisthira have to be the king if Duryodhana is doing it so nicely? So superficially, he looked like he was doing the job properly. But there was one fault. He did not accept the Supreme Lord at all. In terms of Dharma, he looked like he was following all the rules, but in terms of Bhakti, he had 0 qualification. Yudhisthira, on the other hand, was also perfect in doing his Dharma, and even if he may make some mistakes, like telling a lie or something, but he was perfect in his Bhakti. So he was the most qualified person to be the king. So Dharma is one aspect, but we should never think that we could separate Dharma from Bhakti. It may be a small element within Dharma, but nevertheless it has to exist. For that reason, the kings who are empowered to rule and establish Dharma, that is Manu and his descendants, they must also be devotees of the Lord. And rightly so, because it's the Lord who appoints them, so he's not going to appoint somebody who is an atheist. So the two things go together. However, one of the functions of the king is to establish Dharma, and for people in general who are not even devotees, at least they have to follow Dharma. So that is what gets emphasized by the leader, the king. You follow the rules. It is said, of course, by the Bhagavatam that you can follow the rules of Dharma and do karma yoga. But even if you want to attain material success and go to Svarga Loka, or wherever you desire to go in the next body, you could not do so if you neglect the worship of the Lord. So karma yoga, varnashram, cannot exist separately from bhakti. There may be little bhakti, but at least some bhakti has to be there in order for karma yoga to give its results. In other words, the whole process of karma yoga and jnana and Ashtanga yoga are related to the Supreme Lord, and He gives the mercy by which these processes work. And if you offend the Lord in these processes, you cannot get the result. So if you have karma yoga without worship of the Lord, no, you cannot get the result. If you do jnana yoga without worship of the Lord, you do not get liberation. If you do yoga without worshiping the Lord, you do not get liberation also. So everything is dependent upon bhakti in karma yoga, jnana yoga, Ashtanga yoga. Bhakti yoga, on the other hand, is independent. It does not need karma yoga, does not need jnana yoga, does not need Ashtanga yoga. It can operate independently. So that shows a superiority of bhakti. So why doesn't the king just say, everybody chant Hare Krishna, everybody just do bhakti? Because most people aren't interested. They don't have faith. So they're not qualified for bhakti. So therefore they're given this other system. At least follow the rules and regulations. Do the dharma at least. If you're not interested in getting out of the material world, at least follow dharma. Yeah? But within that dharma there's a little trick. There's a little bit of bhakti. In that way, karma yoga has a slight tendency to produce bhakti because there's a little bhakti in it. But it's not a major cause. So, Duryodhana was very nice and perfect in many ways, but he got rejected because he did not accept the Supreme Lord. He actually was an offender. He offended Krishna. Once when Krishna went to make peace between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, he came to the camp of Duryodhana, and he was very gentle, etc. But Duryodhana was so evil-minded that he says, we will imprison Krishna. We will capture him, which is very unethical for the Kshatriya to do, because he was just acting as a messenger. You don't imprison the messenger. The messenger is a neutral person. So he said, let us imprison him. So when they tried to grab Krishna, he showed the Vishvarupa, the universal form, whole form of the universe. Nobody could touch him. He was a huge form. Everybody was astonished. And then he came back to normal. And then what did Duryodhana say afterwards? It was a trick. He's just like a magician. He's just an ordinary human being. So even if Krishna were to display all of his powers, then still Duryodhana won't accept. We see Arjuna, when he saw the universal form, then he understood, you are the Supreme Lord. I offer my respects to you. But Duryodhana would not accept. So that he's a prime example of a materialist. Even if God shows his form, he won't accept. He'll take it as some trick or some material thing. So, therefore, one has to have some bhakti along with that dharma in order for it to be successful. So when we talk here of dharma being full in Satya Yuga and gradually decreasing by 1/4 in Treta Yuga, 1/4 in Dwapara Yuga, and 1/4 in Kali Yuga, yeah, dharma is there and it's decreasing, but simultaneously the bhakti is also decreasing because within that dharma there is also bhakti. So therefore the two things are simultaneous. Then of course we also say, what is the highest dharma? Parodharma. Parodharma is bhakti. Okay? We have regular dharma and we have supreme dharma, bhakti. Yeah. So in that sense we're taking the word in a little different meaning. When you speak of dharma, we mean varnashram system. Rules and regulations to get artha and kama. And when we say jnana, we mean moksha. Goal is moksha. We say bhakti, goal is prema. Yeah. But when we talk about parodharma, we mean the ultimate process. So in that sense, dharma is simply a process, a method, the highest method, because it achieves, bhakti achieves prema. So parodharma is bhakti, bhakti is prema. So it's the highest process. Okay? And whereas the regular dharma is lesser dharma. So we should be careful when we use the word dharma also, that we don't exclusively give the meaning of varnashram system without the worship of the Lord. So therefore the dharma has bhakti within it. But we do not call varnashram bhakti. We cannot make it a synonymous word. Karma yoga means bhakti yoga, exactly. Yes, it has bhakti yoga in it, so in that sense it's bhakti yoga. But it is quite different from bhakti yoga as we practice it. That is, we say bhakti yoga means hearing about the Lord, chanting his name, worshipping the deity, offering respects to the Lord, taking prasadam. That's bhakti yoga for us. So there is some bhakti yoga in karma yoga, but the emphasis is not upon the bhakti. It's upon other things. So we have the nitya kriyas and the naimittik kriyas. These are emphasized in the varnashram system, dharma. Many of which we're not very familiar with at all. Some of which we do, some of which we don't do. So the nitya karmas are obligatory duties for a civilized person. And they'll vary somewhat with the different varnas, from Sudra to Brahmana. And the nitya karmas, of course, are emphasized, especially for the Brahmanas. They have to do this every day. They have to do that every day. So, of course, there's many activities they have to do every day. They have to chant the Gayatri Mantra every day with certain rituals called the Sandhya Vandana, 3 times a day, chanting Vedic mantras. Most of the ceremony is taken up with the other mantras, and maybe they chant the Gayatri Mantra 10 times. So they have to do that 3 times a day. And so they have to take an hour, 2 hours, simply doing that. That's one of their sadhanas. They have to do the Panchamahayagya every day. Recite the Vedas. Worship the ancestors. Worship human beings by offering food to everybody, all the guests. Bhuta Yagya, give food to the animals. Worship the Devatas and Supreme Lord, Deva Yagya. So they have to do, every day they do these things to get rid of their accidental sins every day. And they have many other duties they have to do all day long. And then they have their occupational duty. And if they don't do these things, they omit to do them, it's considered a sin. If you don't do your Sandhya Vandana, it's a sin. If you don't do your Panchamahayagya, your 5 daily sacrifices, you're sinful, etc. So you have to do everything. If you don't do it, it's sinful. And then you have periodic activities like Shraddha rites. So for your ancestors, you have to keep doing these Shraddha rites every year for your departed ancestors, mother and father and grandfather, etc. And you have to do samskars for your whole family all the time. So these are the rituals of the varnashram system that you have to follow. Now, they are related to bhakti because some of the mantras have Vishnu in them. And of course, we drastically modify those samskars in the Satkriya Sardipika of Gopalbhatta Goswami so that we include the name Vishnu and we cross out the names of the Devatas everywhere to make it more spiritual and Vaishnava oriented. But anyway, there is some reference to Vishnu in the samskaras, etc. But many of the other people don't even think of Vishnu. They're thinking of Shiva or Devatas or Surya Dev when they're chanting the Gayatri Mantra or whatever. So it's not prominently directed towards Supreme Lord. But there's an element of worship of the Lord there also, as with the Gayatri Mantra. So we take the Gayatri Mantra as meaning Vishnu, Supreme Lord. Others may not take it like that, and their goal is not prema, their goal is punya, material advancement. So that's why the bhakti there is a little bit different from the bhakti that we have in the pure form, what we call bhakti yoga. But nevertheless, that is necessarily there. When Krishna tells Arjuna in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you have to do sacrifices, you have to worship the Devatas and become prosperous in this world. Yes, but then as is, what is yagya? Prabhupada quotes in the purport that yagya vai Vishnu. This is from the Vedas. Yagya means Vishnu. He's the name of Vishnu. So ultimately, if you do sacrifices, you also have to worship Vishnu. Even if you're going to worship Agni and Indra and Devatas, you have to worship Vishnu also. So there's some Vaishnava tendency there by obligation in even karma yoga, but it's minor. So therefore we don't call that process bhakti yoga, even though we say there's a little bhakti yoga there. And the same with jnana. If a jnani wants to get liberation within his practices of studying Vedanta and doing his austerities and vows and vratas and whatever he's doing, he must also worship the Lord a little bit, worship Vishnu without offense. If he does so, he can get liberation. If he doesn't worship Vishnu or offends him and say he has a material body, he cannot get liberation. He falls from his position, as Bhagavatam states. So, therefore, when we talk about dharma here, we should not just think it is following varnashram. It must also include at least a little bit of bhakti there. And the person who's establishing that dharma, that is the king, he has not just a little bit of bhakti, he has great bhakti. He's appointed by the Supreme Lord. So therefore he has great devotion. And as we see, Yamaraj is great devotee. He's a Mahabhagavata. Dharma, full, when it's full, we have full bhakti. And in Kali Yuga, we have 1/4 dharma. 1/4 varnashram, 1/4 bhakti left. And of course less than that as the period of Kali Yuga advances. As Prabhupada says here, it goes down to 0 at the end of Kali Yuga. Yeah. So that's a hopeless state. So, at the beginning of Kali Yuga, when Dharma is talking to the earth, we have 1/4 of Dharma left. 1 leg of the bull is left. And it's very unfortunate, as is said here, when the 4 legs are intact. The earth says, the bull is very happy. He has 4 legs. He can do everything nicely. So in Satya Yuga, yes, Dharma is intact and Bhakti is intact. Everything go on very nicely by the mercy of the Lord. And people on earth are happy. We have 1/4 Dharma. Necessarily, everybody has to lament. Everything is less. There's less Dharma, there's less Bhakti, less lifespan. We get 1/4 of 100 years maximum lifespan, less food, less everything as a result of the lack of Dharma. Yeah. So the Dharma is related to the condition of the earth. That's the other point. And if Dharma is lacking, the earth also does not give anything, and therefore all living entities, including the human being, have to suffer for that. So Prabhupada mentions here, the best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. So if we want to be happy, even in the material world, we have to maintain the principles. What are the principles? Dharma, which includes bhakti. That minimum we have to maintain somehow or other if we want even material happiness. However, we see that it is very difficult for people to maintain that whole system of varnashram that was present in the other yugas because there's no leader. The king is gone after Parikshit and a few of his descendants, and the whole thing disappeared. And it's described how Sudras assassinated the leader, and they took over the country, and then one Sudra assassinates another Sudra, and they become the leaders of society. And then gradually, of course, the whole world falls apart into different minor groups. So there's no guarantee that we can have Dharma at all, because the key element there, the king, is missing. Naturally, Dharma must suffer a lot. So we can do our best to maintain the principles. How do we maintain that system? Prabhupada gives a little clue here. We have the individual and we have the group. It says collectively here, individually or collectively. So collectively, it becomes very difficult because the leader is missing. Individually, we can do it. It may be difficult because everybody else is doing something different, so in that sense, it's a little difficult. But nevertheless, in most places, we can do it individually. So that's one thing. But we can't do it collectively. We can do it individually. Maintain the principles. So how do we do that? Maintain minimum of dharma. So that then cleverly, very cleverly, we have within this whole symbolic form here of the four legs, then we get the principles. Satya, etc. Truthfulness and compassion and tapasya, cleanliness. And then we have the things that destroy it. Meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex, etc. So at least minimum. We may not follow all the nitya karmas and namitta karmas and the varnashram system. We don't have a king, etc. At least we follow minimum of the dharma, those four principles somehow or other. Cannot follow perfectly, but we try to institute some sort of standard there. So that's the dharma aspect. And along with that, we can do the bhakti aspect, which is free of everything. It can exist without the karma yoga, or the jnana yoga, or the astanga yoga. It can exist in any society with no dharma at all. Avamlechas and yavanas or whatever. That part can exist anywhere. Okay? So we do the bhakti, and we follow the regulator principles. At least that much. Okay? So that way we have the dharma and the bhakti there. So that's how we can operate within Kali Yuga, at least. We have a little controversy. Let us establish Varnashram system, but how are we going to establish that Varnashram system? Where is the king? How do we put a king in power? Every system is democratic in the world. You can't put a king there. Nobody will accept it. How do we divide people up into varnas? So very, very complicated to do that, and we could spend lifetimes trying to do that and not get very far. But at least follow some of the principles there of the varnashram system, the minimum. Okay, at least follow regulator principles. Try to keep the four legs intact somehow or other. Okay? And do the bhakti. That's the solution, the immediate solution that we can work for at least. Prabhupada says the best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. So Parikshit was a very valorous king, and he restricted Kali. He stopped the personification of Kali Yuga from beating the bull. So everything got restored by him. So he was a very valiant king. So we can't come up to that standard, but at least we can do our share individually by following the principles and following bhakti. Then that's how we can have dharma intact individually within Kali Yuga. To make it a little stronger, we can have smaller groups. We can't have countries or nations or a whole world ruled by bhakti under one king. It's very difficult for us to do that. Except, of course, the mercy of the Lord is there. Maybe it could happen, but very difficult. We can't conceive of how it's going to happen, but at least individually could do, or small groups, that sort of collectivity. Okay? So that's why we have society, like ISKCON. International Society for Krishna Consciousness, a society of a group of individuals who get together, follow the principles, perform the bhakti. So that's at least that much we can do. Then of course we can expand a little bit more and involve a little more people, and expand the influence of this group to other people as well. So that's one method by which we can follow out this order of maintaining the principles against all the odds of Kali Yuga. Okay. Any question there?
So when we talk about bhakti yoga, we're talking about demigods, that's not bhakti because it's material desires? Is that how?
Well, in one sense it's indirect, it's the order of the Lord also for unqualified people, just like we have the different Puranas for the people in mode of ignorance and passion, etc. It's permitted by the Lord if you follow properly. But along with that, you have to also accept the Lord. So that's the good part of it, even though it's a little bit. So, and then the other thing, of course, the idea is artha and kama. So that's why we don't call it bhakti in capital. There's a little bit of bhakti there, but it's also mixed bhakti.
So success in worshipping the devas would need some bhakti.
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
And if we say worshipping the Supreme Lord is bhakti, or you're worshipping the devas, what sort of, on the yoga ladder, where does that begin? Does that come under?
Worship well, that's karma yoga. Karma kanda, we can say also if it becomes very fruitive, and our only goal is to get to Sarga Loka, then we say it's karma kanda. But we can do nishkama karma yoga, where we give up the desire for material things. We just do karma yoga as a duty because Krishna says do your duties, so we do our karma yoga in that way. And then we can mix it with a little bhakti, more bhakti, or we can offer the results to the Lord. That's called karma arpana. So that's getting a little closer to bhakti within karma yoga itself. But still the emphasis is still on offering the results of your karmas to the Supreme Lord. So we're still kind of attached there. Whereas bhakti is got nothing to do with that. It's chanting the name of the Lord. It's got nothing to do with sandhya vandanas or samskars or anything. It's just chant the name of the Lord, worship the Lord, etc. So it's done independently as the primary process. The other is like secondary, but we're trying to modify it until it's approaching bhakti and it's more favorable for bhakti.
So sometimes it's mentioned, like particularly people coming from a Hindu background, they're attached to worshipping the devas, but the Vaishnavas say you can worship them in the mood of service of...
Yeah, you take them as servants of the Lord and offer the prasadam of Vishnu to the devatas. That's permitted. Yeah.
Because you have the example of the gopis, they worship Katyayani,
yeah.
Have Krishna as their husband.
Yeah.
So that's not considered fruitive, that's like bhakti.
Yeah. So the goal should be prema, and then the idea is we don't take the devatas as independent entities who give their own benedictions separate from the Lord. Yeah. And then it's okay, we can worship. We worship as servants of the Lord. Make it favorable to bhakti.
Kind of a hard question. It seems more challenging to follow all these principles of Dharma than to follow bhakti. I guess it's easier in a sense because you can get your material desires still fulfilled in bhakti.
That's the only we say inspiring aspect for people in the material world. Well, you get to have a better material life, so let's do the karma yoga for that purpose. Or if you get ambitious for going to Svargaloka, then it becomes a little more complicated, and you have to follow all the rules, and if you break one of the rules, you don't get any results. So in that sense, it's a bit headache also. But if we want to get good material results, then that's our impetus for doing it. So bhakti yoga definitely easier. There's less rules and regulations. It doesn't depend on varna, it doesn't depend on gunas or anything. And it's not dependent upon following all those rules for its success. So in that sense, bhakti is much easier. It's a more practical process for everybody in the world. But unfortunately, if you don't have faith, then you have to do the other process. So the only question is, well, if nobody has faith, then how you can spread bhakti everywhere? So then the answer to that is we have to instill faith in people. Then they can take to the process of bhakti. So we have two duties. One is to cultivate bhakti in people that have faith. The other is to help people develop the faith. We do that by their agyata sukriti. They can just contact bhakti and we don't have to preach to them. And by the gradual contact, the prasadam or hearing the name, etc., they gradually develop faith. And a little favorable, and then willing to listen. When they're willing to listen, then we can encourage them to develop the bhakti.
before Krishna came to this planet in the previous ages, and not only, you know, the walk of the Treta and the Satya, but even the cycles before that, because Krishna only comes once every 1,000 cycles.
Yeah.
So the worship is actually Narayan by Kunta, so in Bhagavatam,
or we also have the avatars, Nrsimhadev or Vamana or Varaha. Many appear at Swayambhuva Manvantara in the first part of the day. It's 7 in the morning and we're at 12 noon, so throughout the day.
Classifications of expansions of Narayan or Krishna, because actually Narayan by Kunta is the liberated, you know, that's the liberated by Kunta, the liberated planets, whereas Mahavishnu and his expansions are still within this material universe. So how do people classify worship of the avatar as achieving liberation?
Oh, well, you could take for liberation, but then you're more like a yogi who meditates on Paramatma and emerges into Paramatma, or the Gyanis who accept Vishnu in order to get liberation. And then they merge into it, unfortunately. So you can get liberation through Vishnu, but if you're a devotee, then you worship Vishnu and you go to Vaikuntha in the spiritual world. So you get prema. That's also a type of prema in Vaikuntha, but it is dasya, of course, servitude, and with Aishvarya aspect in it. But you get to the spiritual world and you get spiritual body, etc. So that's the what happens in the other yugas throughout the day of Brahma. They worship a form of the Lord with Aishvarya, and they get dasya rasa, and they go to Vaikuntha. If they're less fortunate, then they worship Vishnu and they get liberation as Gyanis or yogis.
So in other words, actually, Narayan Vaikuntha is Narayan Vaikuntha. To get to Vaikuntha, you have to worship the different avatars that come from Krishna on this.
Or you could worship Vishnu also, just to worship the Vishnu form. For instance, we have within the universe, we have Kshiralaksha Vishnu on the Milk Ocean there, or you have Garbhadaksha Vishnu. So we can worship them not as just simply forms in the material world, but with dasya rasa. Then we go to Vaikuntha if we do that.
So that's classified as Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah, even Dhruva, he saw a form of Vishnu. So that it looked like Vishnu, but it's called Dhruva Priya, or Prishni Garbha. So he actually is a avatar within the material world, one of the 24 avatars, and he appeared to Dhruva, but he was a Vishnu form. He looked just like Vishnu in the spiritual world. So some of the avatars look exactly like Vishnu as well.
Can you please elucidate on the statement that bhakti is decreasing? Decreasing in like 1/4 every yuga.
Yeah.
So it means that somehow it depends on the external circumstances, but I had a feeling that it doesn't. So,
Bhakti.
Yeah.
Oh, why would bhakti decrease in all the ages? Well, everything decreases. People become more sinful, they become more materialistic. The gunas are not proper, but of course bhakti doesn't depend on that. But still, along with the dharma and the gunas going lower, we can say the good fortune of people to develop faith also becomes lower in one sense. Everything is useless in Kali Yuga. At the same time, it's possible to counteract that. In spite of the fact that the dharma is bad, bhakti can operate independently. So that's our kind of, we can say, loophole in Kali Yuga, that we can increase the bhakti in spite of the decrease of everything else. Yeah. So of course, it doesn't have to, the dharma, though the dharma decreases, it's not necessary that the bhakti decreases in all the ages also. It depends also upon the will of the Supreme Lord and also the efforts of the devotees. So in spite of the decrease in everything else like lifespan, prosperity, dharma, etc., bhakti can operate independently. So at any point in time, the devotees, by the mercy of the Lord, they preach, they can increase the bhakti in spite of the fact that everything else is going down. So it doesn't necessarily go down at the same rate as everything else, but generally the tendency of everything, and as we go down, is more irreligion, less faith, etc.
Thank you very much for the wonderful explanation. But what about the 10,000 years of sacred yoga with Kali Yuga? You say everywhere is the Christian food, but here there's so much trauma, and there's so many nice things, and the world is very happy, and beautiful. So is sacred yoga manifesting right here, right now?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, well, Satya Yuga is a prediction in, not Satya Yuga, but it's an increase within Kali Yuga of Dharma in general and Bhakti also. There'll be, according to Brahma Vivarta Purana, for 10,000 years there'll be a period where people become dedicated to reciting the Puranas and doing kirtan and whatever. So Dharma and Bhakti seem to increase at that time. It doesn't mean that everything is good, but at least sections which are counter to the general tendency of Kali Yuga. So that's the, say, one of the positive aspects. We get 10,000 years, and then after that, of course, it goes down again. So within this period, Bhakti can flourish more. As it says, independent of material circumstances. At the same time, we have the will of the Lord, so he's saying 10,000 years you can do it. Then it goes down until the end of the Yuga is the number of devotees is much less. So it means the will of the Lord is also involved in this.
So, all right, getting back to Krishna expands himself as Narayan in Vaikuntha, and he expands himself as Vishnu in the Lord Vishnu in the material realm. So, what actually is the difference between Vishnu and Narayan? Because
Same. Yeah. This name is different, and we could say that like the Purusha avatars, Garbhodaksha, Vishnu, Mahavishnu, those are exactly the same as Narayan in the spiritual world. Only the function is a little bit different because they're related to creation of the material world. And then we have an avatar in the material world. He may look exactly like the Vishnu in the spiritual world. Just like Krishna, when he comes, is exactly the Krishnas in the spirit, in Goloka. So the Narayan in the spiritual world and the Vishnu who appears in the material world, exactly alike. They're all spiritual, non-different.
It's like we have a Kali name.
Yeah. Yeah, so Narayan and Vishnu is just names of the same entity, same person, actually. I think we call him Vaikuntha-pati also, Lord of Vaikuntha, or other names. Are reversed. And it's two instead of, or three instead of two, or whatever like that, or two instead of one. That's there. That's the only place I've seen that. So, and it's not explained anywhere how a reversal would take place. And generally we don't see a reversal of names either, or a reversal of lengths of the yugas, or the qualities, or the yuga dharma either, that, in Treta Yuga it was deity worship, and then in Dwapara Yuga it's, Homa or whatever like that. So it generally seems to be it doesn't really reverse or whatever. One interpretation that I give maybe is that the word that is used is paryaya, means it's just a transitional period rather than a reversal. So paryaya can mean reversal or transition, so maybe it just means transition from one yuga to the next. Okay, Hare Krishna.